My name is Claudia. I'm 32 years old and work as an interior designer in Boston. Just 3 weeks ago, I was in a horrific car accident that left me fighting for my life in the ICU. I desperately called my parents over and over, but they didn't come. My sister Megan was having a meltdown over paint colors for her new house, and that was apparently more important than my critical condition. When they finally showed up days later, they had no idea what awaited them. The legal documents I had prepared would change our family forever. Before I continue my story, let me know where you're watching from, and hit that subscribe button to see how I finally stood up to a lifetime of being the forgotten child. Growing up as the older sister to Megan, who's now 29, I always knew my place in the family hierarchy. I was the responsible one, the achiever, the one who never caused problems. Megan, on the other hand, was the golden child whose every whim and tantrum commanded immediate attention from our parents. This wasn't just occasional favoritism, it was our family's defining dynamic. I still remember my high school graduation day. I was valedictorian, set to give a speech I'd spent weeks perfecting. That morning, Megan announced her dance recital had been rescheduled to the exact same time. Without a moment's hesitation, my parents decided they would attend her recital instead. "Your grandparents will record your speech," my mother said, patting my shoulder. "Megan really needs our support right now. You understand you're the mature one." I understood all right. I understood that my achievements would always be secondary. When I got accepted to Harvard with a partial scholarship, I was ecstatic. My parents planned a small dinner celebration, nothing extravagant, but at least an acknowledgement of my hard work. The night of the dinner, Megan called home crying because her boyfriend of 3 weeks had broken up with her. Dinner canceled. My father didn't even look apologetic as he grabbed his car keys to go pick her up. "We'll celebrate another time, Claudia. Family comes first." What he meant was, Megan comes first. My 21st birthday dinner followed the same pattern. We were halfway through the main course at my favorite restaurant when Megan called. She couldn't find her favorite jacket and was having a meltdown before a date. My parents immediately asked for the check-boxing up food we'd barely touched. "You're an adult now, Claudia," my mother said, as if that explained everything. "Megan still needs more guidance." Despite all this, or perhaps because of it, I thrived professionally. I worked through college, graduated with honors, and built a reputation as one of Boston's most sought-after interior designers. I created a beautiful apartment for myself filled with carefully selected furniture and art that made me feel at home in a way my parents' house never did. A year ago, I decided to try rebuilding our family relationship. I started attending weekly family dinners, hoping that as adults things might be different. They weren't. Every conversation still revolved around Megan's latest crisis job dissatisfaction or relationship drama. My parents would ask about my work as an afterthought, usually while clearing the table. My friend Jackson, who's also my attorney, has witnessed this dynamic firsthand. We met in college and have remained close ever since. He's joined me for a few family events and couldn't believe the blatant favoritism. "Your parents realize you're the one who has her life together, right?" he asked after one particularly Megan-centric dinner. I just shrugged. After 30 years, I'd accepted that this was simply how things were. "They're still my family," I would tell Jackson whenever he suggested I distance myself. "It's complicated." Jackson would always respond the same way: "Family is supposed to make you feel valued, not invisible." I carried those words with me, feeling their truth, but unable to act on them. Part of me still craved parental approval, still hoped that one day they would see me. I kept showing up to those dinners, kept taking their calls when Megan was having a crisis, and they needed to vent, kept sending thoughtful birthday and holiday gifts that were acknowledged with brief thank you texts. I maintained this delicate balance of self-respect and family obligation until the accident that would finally force me to choose between the two. In the weeks leading up to the accident, Megan had purchased her first house. It needed significant renovations, and despite my professional expertise, my parents suggested she hire another designer. "We don't want to burden you," my mother said, though we all knew the real reason Megan wanted complete control and wouldn't take my professional advice. Instead, I received daily group texts about paint swatches and fixture options, with Megan rejecting every suggestion I offered. I tried to be understanding. Family dynamics are hard to break, and at least we were all in communication. I told myself that was enough. I was wrong. Some relationships have breaking points, and I was about to reach mine. The day of the accident began like any other. It was a Tuesday in October, rainy and cold. I had just finished a client meeting downtown and was heading back to my office. Traffic was heavy due to the weather, but I wasn't in a rush. I remember listening to a podcast about historical architecture, making mental notes for an upcoming project. I was stopped at a red light when it happened. A pickup truck behind me failed to brake, plowing into my car at full speed. The impact pushed my sedan into the intersection where another vehicle T-boned my driver's side. Later, police would determine the truck driver was intoxicated, his blood alcohol level more than twice the legal limit. I don't remember much about the immediate aftermath. Fragmentary images remain: the deafening crash of metal, the strange silence that followed the taste of blood, and the realization that I couldn't feel my legs. I remember voices shouting, someone asking my name, and the terrifying sensation of being trapped in a crushed vehicle. The extraction from my car took nearly an hour. Firefighters had to use the jaws of life to cut through the mangled metal. I drifted in and out of consciousness, aware enough to understand the gravity of the situation. "Stay with us," an EMT kept saying. "You've got multiple injuries, but we're getting you out." Another voice, more urgent. "BP's dropping, we need to move now." As they finally freed me and transferred me to a stretcher, one of the EMTs leaned close. "You've got a collapsed lung, probable internal bleeding, and multiple fractures. We're taking you straight to Boston Medical. Is there someone we should call?" "My parents," I managed to say before darkness claimed me again. I woke up in the intensive care unit, disoriented and in excruciating pain despite the medication coursing through my system. A nurse noticed I was conscious and immediately approached. "Claudia, you're in the hospital. You've just come out of emergency surgery. Try not to move." Surgery. The word penetrated the fog in my mind. "How bad?" I whispered. The nurse's expression was professionally compassionate. "The doctor will explain everything soon. Is there family we can call for you?" I nodded, and she helped me dial my parents' number from the hospital phone when my shaking hands couldn't manage it. The call went straight to voicemail. I left a message. "Mom. Dad. I've been in a serious accident. I'm at Boston Medical in the ICU. Please come as soon as you can." Hours passed. I tried calling again and again. No answer. I asked the nurse for my phone, which had been recovered from the accident and placed with my personal effects. The screen was cracked but functional. I sent text messages to both parents. "Please call me. I'm in the hospital. It's serious. Emergency. Please come to Boston Medical ICU. Why aren't you answering? I need you." Finally, nearly 6 hours after my admission to the ICU, I received a text from my mother. "So sorry to hear about your accident, honey. Megan is having a complete meltdown about the paint colors for her living room. The painter is coming tomorrow and she can't decide. She's inconsolable. We're at her house trying to help her through this. We'll try to visit you tomorrow if things settle down. Keep us updated." I stared at the message in disbelief. I was lying in intensive care after nearly dying, and my sister's paint color crisis took precedence. The nurse must have noticed my expression because she came over to check my monitors. "Are you in pain? Your heart rate just spiked." "My family isn't coming," I said, my voice hollow. "My sister is having a paint color emergency." The nurse's professional mask slipped for just a moment, revealing shock and then sympathy. "Is there someone else we can call for you?" In that moment, lying broken in a hospital bed and utterly alone, I realized just how disposable I was to my own family. All those years of being the strong one, the mature one, had culminated in this being abandoned during the most vulnerable moment of my life because my sister couldn't choose between eggshell and ecru. "Yes," I finally said, "but not yet. I need some time to think." The nurse adjusted my pain medication and promised to check on me regularly. As she left, the full weight of my situation descended on me. I wasn't just physically broken. Something inside me, something that had been bending for decades, had finally snapped. That night in the ICU was the longest of my life. Every beep of the machines, every footstep in the hallway reminded me that I was alone when I shouldn't have been. As the pain medication wore off, the physical agony mirrored the emotional one. I cycled through shock, grief, and finally clarity. This wasn't just one incident. This was the culmination of a lifetime of similar moments. My high school graduation, my college acceptance, my birthdays. Every achievement overshadowed every need subordinated to Megan's. And now my fight for life deemed less important than paint swatches. Morning brought the doctors on their rounds. The chief surgeon, Dr. Patel, reviewed my chart and explained my injuries in detail. You had a collapsed lung, which we've reinflated. 3 broken ribs, a fractured pelvis, and a compound fracture in your right leg that required surgical intervention. Most concerning was the internal bleeding, which is why we rushed you into surgery. Frankly, Ms. Williams, you're lucky to be alive. How long will recovery take? I asked. You're looking at multiple surgeries and months of physical therapy. The pelvic fracture alone will keep you off your feet for at least 6 weeks. You'll need considerable support at home afterward. Home support. The words hung in the air. Who would provide that support? Certainly not my family, who couldn't even be bothered to visit me in the ICU. Later that morning, a hospital social worker named Diane came to see me. She sat beside my bed, clipboard in hand. I understand you haven't had any family visitors yet. Is there someone who can help with your aftercare planning? I swallowed hard. My parents know I'm here. They're busy with my sister. Diane's expression remained neutral, but her eyes reflected concern. Busy enough to not visit the ICU. That's unusual. My sister is having a crisis about paint colors. I said, the absurdity of it striking me anew. They're helping her through it. Diane was silent for a moment. Claudia, as a social worker, I see all kinds of family dynamics. What you're describing raises some red flags about your support system. Her gentle validation broke something open inside me. My entire life has been like this, I admitted. I've always been secondary to my sister's needs, no matter how trivial. But this feels like a breaking point. It would be for most people, Diane agreed. So let's talk about alternatives. Who else is in your support network? As we discussed options, I realized I did have people in my life who cared. Colleagues who respected me, clients who valued my work, friends who showed up consistently. And Jackson, who had been telling me for years what I was only now ready to hear. After Diane left, I asked the nurse for my phone again. My hand shook as I dialed Jackson's number, but my voice was steady when he answered. Jackson, I'm in Boston Medical, ICU. There was an accident. I need you. His response was immediate. I'm on my way. 20 minutes max. True to his word, Jackson arrived in record time. I'll never forget the look on his face when he saw me lying there hooked up to machines, bandaged and broken. He didn't try to hide his shock or his anger when I explained why my parents weren't there. Paint colors. He repeated, his voice dangerously quiet. Your sister is having a meltdown over paint colors, and that's why they haven't come to see their critically injured daughter in the ICU. That's the official reason, I confirmed. Jackson pulled a chair close to my bed, careful not to disturb any of the tubes or wires connected to me. Claudia, I've respected your dedication to your family for years, even when I thought they didn't deserve it. But this crosses a line. This is neglect, pure and simple. For the first time in my adult life, I allowed myself to break down completely in front of someone else. I cried for the little girl who had always tried to be good enough, for the teenager who celebrated achievements alone, for the woman lying in a hospital bed abandoned by the people who should have loved her most. Jackson held my hand through it all, careful of the IV line. When I finally quieted, he spoke with the measured tone I recognized from his courtroom appearances. You have options, he said. Legal options. You can remove your parents from your medical directives. You can change your will. You can protect yourself financially and medically from people who have demonstrated they won't protect you. That sounds so final, I whispered. It can be temporary, Jackson assured me. But right now, you need advocates who will actually show up for you. I think we should document this neglect formally in case there are disputes later. We spent the next few hours discussing legal protections. Jackson explained power of attorney advance directives and the process of changing beneficiaries on my accounts and insurance policies. He made calls to his office arranging for documents to be prepared and brought to the hospital. "What if they show up while we're doing this?" I asked. "Then they'll see the consequences of their choices," Jackson said simply. "We can also set up a recording device with your permission. Hospital policy allows patients to record conversations related to their care." I nodded, feeling a strange mix of grief and determination. "Do it. I want to remember exactly what they say when they finally decide to grace me with their presence." Jackson set up a small recording device on my bedside table, showing me how to activate it. "Just press this button if they arrive and you want to document the conversation." As he was about to leave, he turned back. "Claudia, I know this is hard. Redefining family boundaries always is. But I've watched you make everyone else a priority for years. Maybe it's time you became your own priority." His words stayed with me after he left. For the first time, I allowed myself to imagine a life where I didn't constantly seek approval I would never receive. A life where I was valued simply for being myself. The thought was simultaneously terrifying and liberating. That night, I slept more peacefully than I had in years, despite the pain and the hospital noises. I had made a decision. Whatever happened next, I would no longer accept scraps of attention from people who should have given me their whole hearts. My parents finally arrived at the hospital 3 days after my accident. I was still in the ICU, though my condition had stabilized enough that doctors were discussing moving me to a regular room soon. I had just finished a painful physical therapy assessment when they walked in looking completely unruffled. My mother was carrying a stack of home decorating magazines. My father was complaining about the hospital parking situation. Neither of them showed any sign that they were visiting their daughter who had nearly died. "There you are," my mother said, as if I'd been hiding from them. "You look better than I expected." I pressed the recording button Jackson had shown me before responding. "I've been here for 3 days." My father waved this away. "We've been dealing with quite a situation at your sister's house. Complete chaos with the renovation. The painter showed up and Megan still hadn't decided on colors. She was having panic attacks about it." "We brought some magazines," my mother added, placing them on my bedside table. "We thought you might help Megan narrow down her choices since you're stuck here anyway." I stared at them, searching for any sign of awareness about what they were saying. There was none. In their world, my medical emergency was an inconvenience, a disruption to the all-important task of managing Megan's renovation crisis. "Why didn't you come when I called?" I asked, my voice steady despite the emotion building inside me. "I left messages saying it was serious." My mother sighed. "We knew you were being taken care of. The hospital would have called us if there was a real emergency." "I was in a car accident," I said slowly. "I was in emergency surgery. I'm in the ICU. How is that not a real emergency?" My father shifted uncomfortably. "Now, Claudia, don't be dramatic. Accidents happen. Megan was absolutely beside herself about these paint colors. The stress was triggering her anxiety. We couldn't just leave her like that." "The painter is coming back tomorrow," my mother added, as if this explained everything. "So we need your input on these color schemes today if possible." I took a deep breath, feeling surprisingly calm. "Before we discuss paint colors, I'd like to know if either of you asked my doctors about my condition." They exchanged a quick glance. "We spoke to a nurse briefly," my mother said. "She said you were stable." "Did you ask what happened to me? What my injuries are? How long recovery will take?" Another uncomfortable silence. Finally, my father spoke. "Look, we're here now. It's not like you were dying or anything." The irony of his statement almost made me laugh. "Actually, Dad, I was dying. I had internal bleeding that required emergency surgery. I have a collapsed lung, 3 broken ribs, a fractured pelvis, and a compound fracture in my right leg that needed surgical repair. The doctor said I'm lucky to be alive." The social worker was concerned because no family members had visited me in the ICU for days after a life-threatening accident. My mother's expression tightened. "Well, that seems a bit exaggerated. You're talking to us right now, aren't you?" "Because I survived despite your absence," I replied. "I needed you, and you chose paint colors over me. Again." "Now that's not fair," my father protested. "Megan needed us too." "For paint colors," I repeated. "Not a life-threatening emergency. Paint colors." My mother flipped open one of the magazines. Speaking of which, Megan's leaning toward this eggshell white, but I think it's too cold for her living room. What do you think? The sheer disconnect of her question left me momentarily speechless. It was at that exact moment that Jackson walked in carrying a leather portfolio. "Sorry to interrupt," he said, not sounding sorry at all. "I have those documents you requested, Claudia." My parents looked at him in confusion. "Who are you?" my father demanded. "Jackson Taylor, Claudia's attorney," he replied smoothly, extending his hand. Neither of my parents took it. "Attorney," my mother repeated. "Why do you need an attorney in the hospital?" Jackson looked to me and I nodded for him to continue. "I'm here to finalize some important legal changes Claudia has requested, specifically changes to her advance medical directive power of attorney and will." My father's face darkened. "What changes?" "Claudia has decided to remove both of you as her medical proxies and beneficiaries," Jackson stated professionally. "She's also filing for a protective order to ensure her medical information remains private." The shock on their faces would have been satisfying if it wasn't so painful to witness. My mother recovered first, her expression shifting from surprise to indignation. "This is ridiculous," she sputtered. "We're her parents. You can't just cut us out because we were a few days late visiting the hospital. You're overreacting, Claudia. You always were sensitive." My father took a more threatening approach. "If you're thinking about your grandmother's inheritance, you should reconsider this stunt. Family money stays with family who respect family." I looked at them both, seeing with perfect clarity the dynamic that had shaped my entire life. This isn't about money. This is about a lifetime of being treated as less important than Megan. This accident didn't create the problem, it just made it impossible for me to ignore anymore. "So you're punishing us because we were helping your sister?" my mother asked incredulously. "I'm protecting myself from people who have demonstrated repeatedly that they won't protect me," I corrected her. "There's a difference." My father stood up abruptly. "You'll regret this when you calm down. Come on, Karen. She clearly needs some time to come to her senses." My mother gathered her magazines. "We'll tell Megan you were too tired to look at paint samples. Call us when you're thinking more clearly." They walked out without saying goodbye, without asking when my next surgery was scheduled, without offering any help for my months-long recovery ahead. I watched them go, feeling a strange mixture of grief and relief. Jackson waited until they were gone before speaking. "Are you okay?" I wasn't, not really, but I would be. "I'm better than I was 3 days ago," I said, "and that's a start." The family drama escalated rapidly after my parents left the hospital. Within hours, my phone was flooded with text messages and voicemails, not just from my parents and Megan, but from extended family members as well. My Aunt Susan texted, "Your mother is distraught. How could you do this to your parents? They've given you everything." My Uncle Robert called to tell me I was being unnecessarily cruel to people who only wanted what was best for the family. Megan left a scathing voicemail. "You've always been jealous of my relationship with Mom and Dad. Now you're using this accident to manipulate everyone. So typical of you to turn a minor incident into a drama where you're the victim. Grow up, Claudia." A minor incident. My sister thought my life-threatening accident was a minor incident. That single phrase crystallized everything wrong with our family dynamic. I asked the nurses to screen my calls and limit visitors to people on an approved list. Jackson's name was at the top. My family members were notably absent. 2 days after my parents' visit, my Aunt Susan showed up anyway. The hospital staff, unaware she wasn't approved, allowed her in. She carried a small potted plant and a determined expression. "Your parents sent me," she announced without preamble. "They're beside themselves with worry." "About me or about their access to grandmother's money?" I asked. Susan looked taken aback. "That's unfair, Claudia. They love you." "Then why didn't they come when I called from the emergency room? Why did it take them 3 days to visit me in intensive care? Why was Megan's paint color crisis more important than my critical injuries?" Susan shifted uncomfortably. "They said there was a misunderstanding about how serious it was." "Did they tell you I had internal bleeding, that I needed emergency surgery, that the doctor said I'm lucky to be alive?" "Well, no," she admitted. "They said you had some broken bones from a fender bender." I felt a surge of anger. Does this look like a fender bender to you? I gestured to the machines monitoring my vital signs, the multiple casts and bandages, the IV lines. Susan's eyes widened as she took in the extent of my injuries. They didn't say it was this bad. No, they wouldn't. Because that would make their decision to prioritize paint colors look as awful as it actually was. For the first time, I saw doubt in my aunt's eyes. Claudia, I'm sorry. I didn't know. Now you do, I said simply. After Susan left, Jackson called to check on me. I told him about the family messages and Susan's visit. They're mobilizing the troops, he observed. That's typical when someone disrupts a dysfunctional family system. Everyone tries to pull you back into your assigned role. What should I do? I asked. Maintain your boundaries, he advised. I've finalized all the legal changes. No one can make medical decisions for you except the people you've designated. Your assets are protected. Now you need to protect your peace of mind during recovery. I think I need to block their numbers for a while, I said. The stress isn't helping my healing. That's a reasonable step, Jackson agreed. Your doctor would probably recommend it, in fact. He was right. When Dr. Patel visited later that day, I mentioned the family situation. She didn't hesitate. Stress impedes healing. If certain visitors or communications increase your stress, we can help limit them. Your recovery has to be your priority right now. The hospital staff became unexpected allies in maintaining my boundaries. When my parents showed up unannounced the next day demanding to see me, the charge nurse intercepted them. Ms. Williams is not accepting visitors right now, she informed them firmly. We're her parents, my father insisted. We have rights. Actually, sir, you don't, the nurse replied. Ms. Williams has filed paperwork specifically restricting your access to her and her medical information. I'll have to ask you to leave. When they refused, hospital security escorted them out. The incident strengthened my resolve. Jackson filed for a temporary restraining order the next day, citing their disruptive behavior in a medical facility. Meanwhile, Megan had taken to social media posting thinly veiled comments about ungrateful family members and attention-seeking behavior. Friends who knew both of us sent me screenshots concerned about the public attacks. One nurse, Amanda, saw me looking at the messages during her evening rounds. She paused, then shared her own story. My sister was always my parents' favorite too, she said quietly. Nothing I did was ever as important as her drama. It took me years to realize it wasn't my fault, and I couldn't fix it. How did you handle it? I asked. I created distance, she said. Not out of anger, but self-preservation. I built my own life with people who valued me. It hurt, but it was necessary. Her words stayed with me as I began the long process of physical recovery. A week after the accident, I was moved from the ICU to a regular room. My second surgery was scheduled to repair my leg properly. Through it all, I maintained the wall between myself and my biological family. I requested copies of my medical records partly to document the severity of my injuries should my family continue to downplay them, and partly to fully understand my own condition. The detailed reports confirmed what I already knew. I had been minutes away from death when I arrived at the emergency room, and my family had been too busy with paint swatches to care. I changed my phone number, giving the new one only to Jackson and a small circle of trusted friends. I updated my emergency contacts at work and with all my doctors. I began in small but significant ways to build a life that didn't include the people who had demonstrated they couldn't be relied upon in a crisis. The hardest part wasn't the physical pain or the practical challenges. It was grieving the family I had always wanted but never truly had. Late at night, when the hospital was quiet, I would sometimes cry for that loss. Not the loss of the actual people who had disappointed me so profoundly, but the loss of the idea of them. The parents I had always hoped they could be. But with that grief came a strange sense of freedom. For the first time in my life, I wasn't arranging my expectations, my schedule, my very sense of self around people who would never put me first. I was learning finally to put myself first. It was both terrifying and liberating. My physical recovery was a long and painful process. After 2 weeks in the hospital, I was transferred to a rehabilitation facility for intensive physical therapy. The fractured pelvis meant I couldn't bear weight on my legs for 6 weeks. The compound fracture in my right leg required another surgery and months of rehabilitation. Throughout this challenging time, I discovered who my real support system was. My assistant Lauren coordinated with clients rescheduling projects and keeping my business running. My neighbor Thomas collected my mail and watered my plants. Colleagues from the design community sent flowers, books, and offers of help when I returned home. Most surprisingly, Jackson's family embraced me completely. His mother Martha visited regularly, bringing home-cooked meals that were infinitely better than hospital food. His sister Amelia, a physical therapist herself, gave me exercises to complement my official therapy. When I expressed surprise at their kindness, Martha looked genuinely confused. "You're important to Jackson, so you're important to us," she said, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. That's what family does. Family. The word had such different meanings now. After 8 weeks of intensive rehabilitation, I was finally cleared to return home, though I still needed assistance and ongoing outpatient therapy. Jackson and his friends helped adapt my apartment for my recovery, installing temporary ramps over the few steps, adding grab bars in the bathroom, and rearranging furniture to accommodate a wheelchair and later a walker. It was during this transition home that I started therapy, not just physical, but psychological. Dr. Morris specialized in family trauma and helped me understand the patterns that had shaped my life. "What you're describing is a classic golden child scapegoat dynamic," she explained during one session. "Your sister was the golden child who could do no wrong while you were expected to be self-sufficient and not have needs." "But why?" I asked. "What did I do wrong?" "Nothing," Dr. Morris said firmly. "These dynamics form for complex reasons often rooted in the parent's own upbringing. The important thing to understand is that it wasn't about you. You didn't cause it, and you couldn't have fixed it by being better or more deserving of their attention." Those sessions helped me process both the immediate trauma of the accident and abandonment, and the deeper wounds of a lifetime of emotional neglect. I joined an online support group for adult children of emotionally unavailable parents and found comfort in connecting with others who understood my experiences without explanation. Meanwhile, my parents made sporadic attempts to reestablish contact on their terms. They sent a formal-looking letter through their attorney expressing concern about my rash decisions and urging me to consider the implications for family harmony. There was no acknowledgement of their failure to support me, no apology for prioritizing paint colors over my life-threatening condition. My response, drafted with both Jackson and Dr. Morris's input, was brief and clear. "I am recovering well, no thanks to you. I will consider resuming contact when you can acknowledge the harm your actions caused and demonstrate genuine change. Until then, please respect my boundaries." 3 months after the accident, when I was finally able to move around my apartment with just a cane, Megan showed up unannounced. My doorman called up and I hesitated before allowing her to come up. Part of me wanted to refuse, but another part needed closure. When I opened the door, Megan looked momentarily shocked at my appearance. I was still thin from the weeks of hospital food and limited mobility, and the scar on my forehead was prominently visible. "You look terrible," she blurted out. "Nice to see you too," I replied dryly. "What do you want, Megan?" She pushed past me into the apartment, glancing around as if expecting to find evidence of some nefarious scheme. "I want to know why you're tearing the family apart with this ridiculous legal stuff. Mom and Dad are upset and the whole extended family is talking." I carefully made my way back to my chair, the cane thumping softly on the hardwood floor. "I nearly died, Megan. While you were having a meltdown over paint colors, I was in emergency surgery. Our parents chose to help you select eggshell versus ecru rather than come to the hospital when their daughter was in critical condition." Megan had the grace to look uncomfortable. "They didn't know how serious it was." "They knew," I countered. "I called. I texted. The hospital called. They knew, and they chose paint colors anyway." "It wasn't just about paint colors," she protested. "I was having severe anxiety about the whole renovation process." "And I was having severe internal bleeding," I shot back. "Do you see the difference in urgency?" Something shifted in her expression. "Look, I know it seems bad, but that's just how Mom and Dad are. They've always been more responsive to my needs. It doesn't mean they don't love you." Her casual acknowledgement of our parents' favoritism stunned me. "You know, of course I know," she said, looking surprised. "It's been that way since we were kids. You were always the strong one who didn't need them. I was the one who fell apart, so I got the attention." "Did you ever think that was unfair to me?" I asked quietly. Megan shrugged. "That's just how families work. Someone gets to be the star, someone gets to be the supporter. You were good at being independent." "I had to be," I said. "I was never given a choice." "Well, you're choosing now, aren't you? Cutting everyone off, getting lawyers involved. It's so extreme, Claudia." "No, what's extreme is not visiting your daughter in the ICU because your other daughter can't pick paint colors. What's extreme is spending my entire life being treated as less important, less worthy of care and attention. What's extreme is nearly dying alone because my family had better things to do." Megan was silent for a long moment. "I didn't know how bad it was," she finally admitted. "Mom and Dad said you had a minor accident and were being dramatic about it. Did you ask the hospital? Did you call me directly?" She looked away. "No." "That's the problem, Megan. In our family, no one ever questioned the narrative that my needs were less important than yours. Even now, you're here not because you're concerned about me, but because my actions have disrupted the family system that benefits you." "That's not fair," she protested. "It's exactly fair," I replied. "When was the last time you stood up for me? When did you ever say, 'Wait, we should check on Claudia first,' or 'Maybe Claudia's graduation is more important than my dance recital'? You benefited from their favoritism your entire life, and you never once questioned it." Megan stood up abruptly. "I didn't come here to be attacked. No, you came here to convince me to go back to accepting less than I deserve. That's not going to happen anymore." After she left, I felt drained but oddly peaceful. For the first time, I had directly confronted the family dynamic that had shaped my life, and I had done it without apologizing for my feelings or needs. Despite the challenges of physical recovery, my professional life continued to flourish. My clients were understanding about the accident, and many waited for my return rather than finding another designer. I began working remotely, conducting consultations via video call and having my assistant visit sites when necessary. One client, Margaret, particularly impressed me with her consideration. She had hired me to redesign her lake house before the accident and insisted on keeping our timeline flexible. "Great design can't be rushed," she said, "and neither can healing. Take the time you need." Her kindness was so different from what I was accustomed to in my family that it almost made me uncomfortable at first. Gradually, I developed new relationships that weren't shadowed by the expectations I'd grown up with. Jackson introduced me to his friend Daniel, who had recently moved to Boston to teach architecture at MIT. Daniel's warmth and genuine interest in my thoughts and feelings was refreshing. We began dating cautiously, my physical limitations and emotional healing process making things move slowly, which suited us both. As Thanksgiving approached, I faced my first major holiday estranged from my biological family. In previous years, I would have dutifully appeared at my parents' house, listened to endless stories about Megan's accomplishments, and left feeling diminished. This year, Martha insisted I join their family gathering. "No one should be alone on Thanksgiving," she said firmly, "especially not someone still recovering from such serious injuries." The contrast between their holiday and my family's was stark. At Jackson's parents' home, conversations flowed naturally between all participants. People asked me genuine questions about my work and recovery. My opinions were solicited and respected. When I offered to help despite my limited mobility, Martha gently refused. "You're our guest this year. Next year, when you're fully recovered, I'll put you to work." Next year. The casual assumption of continued connection moved me deeply. After dinner, Jackson found me on the porch watching the sunset. "You okay?" "You got quiet." "I'm good," I said, surprised to realize it was true. "Just thinking about how different this is from what I'm used to. Everyone here actually seems to like each other." "Revolutionary concept," he teased. Then more seriously, "You deserve this, you know. People who see you, hear you, value you. That should be the baseline, not the exception." I nodded, feeling a weight lifting that I hadn't even realized I was carrying. I think I'm finally starting to believe that. That night, I wrote a letter to my parents. Not the one they wanted, retracting my legal decisions and apologizing for overreacting. Instead, I wrote the truth that their consistent pattern of prioritizing Megan had culminated in an abandonment so profound it forced me to recognize I couldn't count on them in crisis, that I was creating a life with people who showed up for me, that I was no longer available for a relationship where I was perpetually last in line for care and attention. Their response came through their attorney: more threats about inheritance, more accusations of being dramatic and ungrateful. They still didn't get it. Maybe they never would. And for the first time in my life, I realized that was their loss, not mine. 1 year after the accident that changed everything, I stood in my newly renovated office, leaning lightly on my cane. The physical therapists said I might always need it for long days or bad weather, a permanent reminder of how close I came to dying. But rather than seeing it as a symbol of loss, I'd come to view it as a badge of survival. The transformation in my life over that year was more significant than the physical recovery, impressive as that was. I had rebuilt not just my body, but my entire understanding of family love and self-worth. Before the accident, I lived in a constant state of muted hope and chronic disappointment. I kept showing up for people who consistently demonstrated I wasn't a priority. I accepted scraps of attention and told myself it was a feast. I confused obligation with love and availability with worthiness. Now I understood the difference. My circle was smaller, but infinitely more supportive. I had let go of relationships that diminished me and invested in those that helped me grow. The contrast was stark in every area of my life. My design business had actually expanded, partly because my enforced physical limitations had prompted me to delegate more and develop systems that didn't rely solely on my presence. My assistant Lauren had grown into a true partner in the business, handling client relations with confidence, while I focused on creative direction. My relationship with Daniel had deepened gradually over months of honest conversations and mutual support. Unlike previous relationships where I'd minimized my needs to accommodate partners, Daniel and I built something balanced from the start. He understood my history and never made me feel burdensome for having boundaries or expressing needs. Most profoundly, my relationship with myself had transformed. Therapy had helped me recognize and challenge the deeply ingrained belief that I was somehow less deserving of care than others. I no longer apologized for taking up space or having needs. I had learned to advocate for myself with the same fierce determination I once reserved for defending others. My parents remained unchanged. They had made a few more attempts at contact, each one focused on their feelings, their loss, their inconvenience. None acknowledged the fundamental issue that had led to our estrangement. In their last email, my father wrote, "When you're ready to be reasonable and act like a proper daughter again, we'll welcome you back." A proper daughter. In their eyes, that meant someone who accepted less than she deserved without complaint. Someone who understood her role was to support, never to need support herself. Someone who wouldn't disrupt family harmony by pointing out its fundamental imbalance. I wasn't that daughter anymore. I never would be again. Megan and I had limited contact. After our confrontation in my apartment, she had retreated for several months. Then, surprisingly, she reached out with a tentative text. "I've been thinking about what you said. I never saw it from your perspective before." It wasn't an apology, but it was an acknowledgement. We'd met for coffee twice since then, brief, careful encounters where we were feeling out whether a new kind of relationship was possible between us. I wasn't optimistic, but I was open to the possibility of change. Jackson remained my rock. His family had formally adopted me into their holiday traditions, and Martha called regularly just to check in. "Family isn't just blood," she told me once. "It's who shows up, who stays, who makes room for all of you, not just the convenient parts." Dr. Morris had helped me understand that the accident hadn't created the rift with my family. It had merely exposed what was already there. "Crisis reveals character," she said during one of our sessions. "Your parents showed you who they are. Believing them is an act of self-respect." That understanding helped me move from anger to acceptance. I no longer raged against their limitations or fantasized about them suddenly transforming into the parents I had always wanted. They were who they were. I had stopped waiting for them to change and focused instead on changing my expectations and building a life that wasn't dependent on their approval. The lessons I'd learned were hard-won, but invaluable. My worth wasn't determined by my family's ability to recognize it. Setting boundaries wasn't selfish. It was an act of self-preservation. True family was defined by actions, not blood. Recognizing toxic patterns early prevented a lifetime of pain. Sometimes the bravest, healthiest decision was walking away from people who couldn't love you properly. I ran my hand along the smooth surface of my new drafting table, feeling grateful for this second chance at life in every sense of the phrase. The accident had broken my body, but freed my spirit. In losing the family I was born into, I had found the family I deserved. Emergency situations reveal what matters most to people. When my life hung in the balance, paint colors mattered more to my parents than my survival. That revelation, painful as it was, gave me the clarity I needed to finally prioritize myself. Now I understood that sometimes you have to lose what you thought you wanted to find what you truly need. Sometimes the family you create is more nurturing than the one you were born into. Sometimes the hardest goodbyes lead to the most healing hellos. What about you? Have you ever had to walk away from a relationship that was damaging your self-worth? How did you find the courage to prioritize your own well-being? Share your story in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories about finding strength in unexpected places. Remember, sometimes the most powerful act of self-love is simply saying, "I deserve better than this." Thank you for listening to my journey, and I hope it helps you navigate your own path to healing.